Welcome to the Medic Side Hustle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Shubhendu Kulshreshtha, an executive coach and an emergency physician, helping clinicians like you make medicine your side hustle. I also author the impactful clinician micro newsletter and a side hustle readiness quiz taken by over 350 clinicians. I'll leave a link to that in the comments. In each episode, we'll sit down with an inspiring guest who's redefined their career, turning their strengths and experience into something greater. We'll dig into their journey and draw out their career roadmap, finding crucial decision-making moments that we can all learn from. In the second half, I'll hand over the hosting to my guests and let them ask me whatever they'd like about coaching and non-clinical careers. Live audience, you'll get a chance to ask us your questions at the end, so keep putting them in the comments. And if you can just add the word letter Q in front of your question, it'll be easier for us to find. All right, so let's start with a very quick introduction, which definitely doesn't do you any justice for Dr. Manthan Mehta. Manthan has an MBBS and also has an MD in pharmacology, but he's since done a lot of other things. He's gone into industry roles and, like me, also mentors fellow clinicians with career development. He's now also the co-founder of Iksa.ai, which I'm dying to find out more about. So thank you for joining me today, Manthan. How are you?
Thank you for having me here, and hello to all the guests tuning in live, and then whoever's going to listen to this later as well.
Yeah, this is amazing. I'm really excited about this episode. And I know that introduction didn't do justice, so just quickly give us a whistle stop tour of what your career's looked like so far.
Right, so I think it starts with the road less traveled. I think it's part of Robert Frost's poetry, and been there since school days. I didn't know why it was my favorite poetry, but I think now looking back, I think I know why. So took some bold career moves, and I think they worked well. I've been lucky. Yeah, so I started my career in academia and research post my MD. Was very keen. I did a lot of research stuff during my MBBS days as well as during my MD days. Like 25, 30 odd publications in my name, attended multiple conferences, and was really excited just doing that. But
Hmm.
while I was attending all those things, I realized that healthcare can actually have greater impact at scale. We as doctors are probably the only one who are empowered to do this. We can't leave it in the hands of policymakers. We shouldn't leave it in the hands of tech players alone. And we should be on the driving seat. So forever that has been my mantra. I think when I joined the pharma industry as well, I was always rooting for, and I still do, for medical affairs to be in the driving seat for pharma, because that's what can actually change outcomes and impact. You put a doctor into anything, and they are actually going to make healthcare patient centric. I think the only person who cares in healthcare is the doctor,
Yeah.
is the healthcare physician, and nobody else. So I kept doing that, and then moved into the startup world, into digital therapeutics. And digital health again is a space that excites me, purely for the reason that I believe in creating impact at scale, and that gives you like hundreds and thousands of patients that are on a program, are on a digital health app, and you can actually see those wonderful outcomes and testimonials coming out. While doing all of this, there were certain need gaps that I saw in the healthcare system, both from the pharma perspective, the digital health perspective, of course, from the doctors and the patient perspective. And that's what led the foundation of IXA to bridge the health gap.
Wow, that is quite a journey, and I love that there was so much mention of the word impact in there. When I speak to loads of clinicians, and especially when I got on LinkedIn, I started networking a lot more like-minded people, and when I look at my own career and thought there was something missing constantly when I was just 100% clinician, I think it was impact, and I think nobody comes into medicine anymore to make money or for status or reputation, but mainly to make a difference in the world around them, and I think that's impact. And I love that you mentioned that we need to sort of own the crossroads that we're at. I mean, doctors are at this unique position where we see the healthcare system and we see what the patients are going through, and we have the ability to influence it. And not enough of us kind of take up the mantle and say, let's do something about it. Tell me a bit more about that transition from MBBS to MD. How did you decide to take up pharmacology, and what were your driving forces?
I think, it's again, for the lack of a better word, I'm going to say it was again a bold move, and a big jump. The clinical non-clinical divide is huge, right?
Hmm.
We all enter medicine and believe that we all want to be surgeons. We all want to see patients day in and day out. And my inclination towards research, towards academia, towards the corporate industry as well. So overall was what led into it. Understood that I'll get the time of my residency to really do a lot of great research work and have the time to create various kinds of studies and understand where goes wrong and what we can do better. And at the same time, then probably move to the pharma industry in varied roles and options that are there. So took up medical affairs because I had a flair for it, liked, was fascinated by the corporate lifestyle of, what it is to be a doctor in a suit and
Yeah.
not the white coat that you are there and moving and living out of a suitcase, traveling different cities, different parts of the world, giving talks and conferences and talking and networking to people. And I think the glamour around the industry also was something that excited me in some way or the other. It was difficult in terms of initial acceptance, of course, and even today it's very difficult for people to digest the fact that somebody has moved to the non-clinical side and taken that valley of death between clinical and non-clinical, and where that bridge is. No regrets on that.
Yeah. And I guess for yourself, and I suppose for some of the people that you kind of mentor and guide as well, are there sort of any dictums or any sort of rules or anything that helps you determine whether a clinical versus a non-clinical life might be for you or not?
Yeah, I earlier on, that's a very good question. Early on when I took it up and people would just ask me and I would glamorize the field so much that a lot of people just followed suit. Later I realized that, I'm not doing an ergonomic fit. Like I'm not sure if whether they're happy or not happy. I think the litmus test is, are you willing to not see patients every day? I think that's where I put the litmus test, saying, are you willing to do that? And if there is a hesitancy in answering, I think that's where I ask them to reconsider, because
Mm.
that's the only step you have to take. Honestly, the career journey then spans depending on what you've done there. The first thing and the first decision that you have to make, and sometimes I put it in metaphors that you have to leave that stethoscope and don a tie. So it's up to you. If there are people nowadays, of course, I see a lot of youth
Mm.
willingly telling me that we don't want to get into this, and we want to get into AI, or we want to get into healthcare systems and HEOR and policy and many other things. But back a decade ago, I'm sure I had no clue what all that meant, and I just asked people around that, is this a good career option to take up? And people guided me really well, and I think I just return the favor now by guiding the rest of the lot.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I like to think that there aren't often right decisions, but decisions that you make right. So you make the decision and you make it work. And it sounds like you had a degree of clarity of saying you don't want to do the clinical work, and you went down saying, I'll take up the tie instead of the stethoscope. And then you spoke to people you mentioned. Is that kind of where you got the support and next steps?
Yes. Yes, a lot of support in terms of because the exposure to non-clinical branches is very low, right? I mean, your entire medical school, the only thing you've seen is patients, head of departments, other doctors, specialists, super specialists in India, and all those people, and you're only fancying that as a life, and you really have no clue what's happening behind the stage. So it's just like kids watching movie, they think all that happens is what you see on the screen, and then as you grow you realize that long list of names and credits that comes at the end is actually the hard
Yeah,
work that goes into making a movie. And I think that's exactly what healthcare is, so I think you have clinicians, you play the role of good actors on the
on
screen,
stage.
the good doctors on stage, and then you have all the other doctors as well playing roles of, being a director, producer, a
Yeah.
cinematographer in various ways, which goes unnoticed, right?
Absolutely, that's so beautiful. And I think for the people that might be joining from the UK, I've not come across a pharmacology training program post MBBS. I may be completely wrong, but give us a flavor of what sort of is covered in MD pharmacology and how does that help you with eventually getting into industry?
So, broadly, the curriculum is actually designed to make you a good academician, a good researcher. It is not designed per se for the industry, but it's about how you take parts into it, right? There are collaboration seminars that you do with clinical branches, there are journal clubs, a lot of research activities that you do, multiple papers that you publish, you study about drug interactions, national pharmacotherapy, do drug audits, also work with governments in terms of what you need in terms of price control, what drugs are required, not required, side effects, pharmacovigilance. therapeutic drug monitoring, people also on clinical rounds to understand and also guide clinicians in terms of what is the profile working like. Antimicrobial stewardship, I think that's another
It's huge.
very key domain there where people are working. One other area of interest that I had was around drug repurposing, and I did my thesis also in that kind of a model where I studied amoxicillin to have analgesic effects.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
My hypothesis was around that, every amoxicillin and clavulanic acid is always prescribed when patients have infections. And if you look at the cardinal signs of inflammation and infection, the four cardinal signs,
Hmm.
you also have pain as one of them. So
Yeah.
what if there is an antibiotic which has slight analgesic potential, which can be synergistic to all the other painkillers that you're taking, which could help in reducing the dose of the analgesics, while
Oh,
of course
wow.
the antimicrobial remains constant. We got a lot of flack earlier on thinking that we're all talking about reducing antimicrobial use and you are repurposing it. But I had a very kind guide and head of department who said, you believe in this, let's go for it. And it won the Indian Council of Medical Research MDMS Thesis Award.
Wow.
It's now
Wow.
published as a book by Scholars Press as well.
That is amazing. That is amazing. And I guess the difference between being academic and being sort of an applied clinician in the sense, yes, of course, why would you increase the use of antibiotics? But like when it comes to creating information and uncovering new novel things, that's what's possible. That's amazing. So congratulations on that, and thank you for sharing that with us. Really exciting. And I'm curious at this point. So you've done your MBBS and MD, and MBBS is very clinically focused. Your MD sounds very research focused. Were you sort of blindsided into thinking that's what your career is going to look like, or had you already made up your mind you're going to go to industry?
I had made up my mind that I will go into the industry. I'd spoken to a lot of industry folks. Research was one of my passions. I was doing that right from my MBBS days in varied spaces, right? I started with, again, a short-term studentship I did for the Indian Council of Medical Research in tuberculosis. And it's a big burden in India. We thought that we should look into it. There were different categories of the regimen, and we looked at why are certain regimens failing, why are patients not completing in spite of supervised therapies and, workers going, healthcare workers and volunteers going right to the door of the patient and giving them the medication. And yet we are seeing failure of therapy and what's happening there. So I had that keen inclination towards research. I did quite a few things during my MBBS days as well. And I was more than happy to have 3 full years to do that during my MD, where I'm
Wow.
just researching and creating those hypotheses. Even today, I have mentees who do interesting research. I mean, I just guide them. They are gracious enough to put my name into it and give me a lot of credit for it. But yeah, I mean, it still stays with me. So I haven't let go of my research hat for the longest time, because even during MD, I knew I wanted to get into the industry and I may not get to do a lot of research. But I still continued, in terms of investigator initiated studies for pharma companies, real world evidence that you generate. White papers for medical affairs. So it didn't stop. Sometimes
Yeah.
it just doesn't stop.
No, it sounds like I can hear the joy behind doing that kind of work for you, and nothing like it when you can make your work align with something that gives you joy, right? With the clients that I work with, we often talk about building equity and building sort of non-financial equity, and how that helps you open opportunities and actually leverage your way into industry careers, or actually leverage your way into building career that you want. And it sounds like the strong research work that you did was perhaps in a way the equity that you were building. Did you have that in mind? Like, did you know that if I do this research project and publish and talk about it, I'll get known and that's how I'll get the job? Or did it just happen?
It happened in retrospect. I
Okay.
think a lot of it happened in retrospect. So, and I strongly believe, and I also guide most professionals, that in your student days, you should not do something too transactional. While you build equity, build all those elements, but it shouldn't be too transactional that, I do this research to get only this. So
Right.
it may not always work very well, in those early days, but in retrospect, yeah, it fell in place. I mean, it fell in place in a way where, the industry realizes or understood that, okay, when he's talking about a research paper, though it may be related to a given drug that the pharma company is working for, he has some credentials in terms of understanding research because he has been a researcher himself. So
Okay.
that helped me in a way.
Hmm.
Never did it in terms of that this is going to land me a better job. I did want to stay differentiated. I
Hmm.
will not deny that by doing multiple such activities or additional projects, I wanted to stay differentiated, that when it comes to hire freshers for the entry role, I stay as a differentiated fresher. And as my first medical director told me that, you are an experienced fresher. When
Okay.
I gave my interview, so that stuck on to me, that it did help.
Yeah.
But people who
Tell me a bit more about what that means. Like, how did you become an experienced fresher?
So I did a lot of additional side hustles during my MD days and the bond period following that, where I was doing contractual medical communication work, medical editor for certain things. And I did small little projects, also consulted for certain startups, designed research studies for them. So I had a fair share of experience, did some contractual advisory boards during weekends and
Hmm.
all of that. So they had a fair idea of what my role actually will look like when I
Okay.
joined the industry. So that's where she jovially tagged it, but I keep using it. It never gets old.
I think that's a brilliant perspective because so many times we wait till the degree completes or get to the point where we've submitted a thesis and we've done our project and we like, now we can go to the world. But you were learning these skills along the way and you said, how can I already start applying them in industry? And that gave you that experience. That's really beautiful. Um, and so then you were making your way, and when I look at high impact and successful non-clinical careers, there's mainly three domains that kind of pop out to me. There's this sense of purpose and this direction, and I think for you it was that wanting to make an impact, wanting to get into medical affairs, and changing the way the world functions through not just policy, but I guess just the decision making side of things, the purpose. The other bit is the equity, and it sounds like you had some equity building up along your way, the hard work you did, the work you did for your startups, I guess, as well. And then the last bit, I think, is influence, which is getting to a position of authority and credibility and being able to make a difference when you get there. How do you see the interplay of those three things in your career journey?
I think very well put in terms of, that these are key driving forces when you actually look at most careers. I mean, why just a transitionary career from
Hmm.
clinical to non-clinical, or I think in most careers. What worked well, I think the purpose has remained constant, right? I
Okay.
mean, a lot of roles have changed for me, a lot of domains have changed for me, but the purpose remains constant. I mean,
Hmm.
it doesn't change. Where I want to create that impact for patients at scale has been the center thought for everything, and that continues. In terms of equity, I think that has helped, played a very significant role in getting visible, people networking, and all of
Hmm.
that. That has all landed me most opportunities where I am, and I proudly say in many forums that I'm a LinkedIn stalker. I was one, and I owe all my opportunities, most of them, at least 80% of them, to LinkedIn, and then that one leads to the other. So it's that first step, and then it's about building onto it,
Hmm.
just taking it as a one-time thing, but then building on to it, saying, oh, I did this with Shubhendu, and he's doing some wonderful work in mentoring, and why restrict ourselves to just a podcast?
Hmm.
Tomorrow we can talk about coaching. You work on the NHS space, and then let's build something on the Indian side of things. So
Hmm.
things just evolve. And so equity, again, I have never taken it, like I said, in a very transactional setting. It's always in a way that we build, we get to know each other, and we see what happens along the way. Influence and authority, I think it's again something that initially I struggled with. I'll be honest, because when a lot of things, at least on this side of the world, are counted by the amount of gray hair you have, or the lesser the hair you have, the more experienced you are. And unfortunately, my genetics are not in favor of me looking experienced in any way. So while I called myself an experienced fresher, people keep looking for experience in terms of span of years spent. And that's where that influencing kind of authority is always a step back in terms of the interplay. What I learned, however, was influencing without authority
Hmm.
as a key driver we talk about in leadership as well, that we should learn about influencing without authority. And I think I went into the breadth of a lot of things, and that's what spans that influence across domains, and that has helped me. Interplay is a constant purpose and a constant drive to keep building that equity. and along the way, build and develop that influence and authority and wait for a receding hairline and more gray hair.
No, that's beautiful. Give us a flavor of what that corporate life was like. Was it what you were expecting? And I think the influence bit really will probably, this is where it might have grown from, and you'd have to lean on it heavily. So I want to hear what that's like. Is it worth it for people to go down that route?
I think it was lovely. I enjoyed my corporate life and in
Okay.
two ways. And today I think I'm able to connect with so many non-medics
Hmm.
everywhere and relate to them on corporate memes and jokes because I have seen the corporate world. So, it's otherwise it's difficult for a lot of medics here to understand what an appraisal looks like. Because if you have your own clinical practice or your own clinic, you don't know what an appraisal looks like, what a matrix structure looks like, and what's a dotted line reporting, and what are Monday blues. Every day is a blue.
Yeah.
So it was beyond my expectations, if not on par. Quite happy with it. But
Hmm.
of course, over time, with the enthusiasm of corporate comes corporate politics. But
Yeah.
there was always that fear that I had that I'm leaving a safe zone, a comfort zone of
Hmm.
the hospital and moving to the corporate. But I think the love and respect that I got in corporate and all cross-functional peers, the way
Yeah.
they respect a doctor in the industry is very, very different from the way they respect a doctor in clinic. I mean,
Wow.
I see them bitching and talking ill about all clinical friends for pharma engagement and obvious reasons,
Yeah.
but very, very nice to me saying, you get us, you understand us, you are there to support us. So, while medical affairs core used to be like a support function to commercial,
Hmm.
but that kind of love that they shower on you while you're working with them is amazing. So
Wow.
I think everybody should give it a shot. It's fun.
Yeah. And in terms of the impact that you were looking to make by getting there, can you speak to that a bit?
I think the core impact I was looking in terms of two ways. One is drug launches and the way drugs work, impacting hundreds of thousands of patients, and then those outcomes that come out of those trials actually is novel. So I was
Hmm.
fortunate. I worked mostly with innovator molecules, so I had the opportunity to go through a lot of their research firsthand, a lot of trials, be a part of a lot of forum where we decide whether to bring a molecule to a region or not, whether what the business case looks like, what the science around it looks like, what a patent cliff will look like. So really, really impactful in terms of impacting business as well,
Hmm.
of course, but impacting and seeing that, this is going to change the face of things. While I worked
Hmm.
with an anti-diabetic that came with cardiovascular protection, it was like thrilling. I've never seen
Yeah.
something like that in my medical career before, and I'm going to talk to all specialists about. So
Yeah.
that was the impact I was looking at. That hey, I am going to reach out to hundreds and thousands of doctors,
Yeah.
talking about this trial, telling them, explaining to them, what actually this means. So again, went back to my love for research where I'm analyzing the research paper and breaking it down for them. And then the impact that they are going to create by prescribing it to so many patients and then
Hmm.
what they're going to do with it. So that's where the impact came in and the influence there as well. I think I got a good flavor of things where amongst that hierarchy of medicine as well, I think I assimilated pretty well with all the senior specialists and others for things like, because it's the drug is new, everybody wants to know things, and they
Hmm.
considered me as a quasi expert of that kind of the trial and molecule and as a point of contact for that. So that influence on both sides, that indirectly to the patients in so many ways, and then with the specialists, I think that was great, very
Yeah,
thrilling.
I'm trying to imagine how exciting that might be because if you're talking about SGLT2 inhibitors, then I was in cardiology when that sort of change was happening in the UK as well. And everyone was super excited. They're like, oh, this patient's eligible. Let's give it to them. Let's give it to them because
Yes.
it makes such a big difference. So it must be amazing to be part of that groundbreaking discovery and implementation. And yeah, I think one of the ways in terms of how you measure impact and how I guess everybody kind of measures impact is how many people do you reach with the work that you're doing, that 1 hour of effort or that decision or that project, how many people's lives is it changing? And I think that's a relatively good way of measuring the impact and how impactful your work is. And so you did this for a couple of years, you were in the industry, and now you're doing something different. And just tell us about Iksa.ai. I'm very excited.
So, working into all these industry, health tech, and all of their domains, we understood that there are huge gaps which we need to fill in terms of visibility of what happens to the patient beyond the clinic. We don't have too many insights into what is actually happening to the patient beyond the clinic. Two, patients need support. They need support coming in from their doctors, and they need personalized support. We log into an OTT platform and log into Netflix, and it's going to give you recommendations based on what you like or what's right for you according to them. Or you log into any social media platform, and the algorithm shows you depending on what time you've spent on a given piece of content. Healthcare is the most critical. I think both you and me know we've been talking of personalized medicine for decades now. And, I don't know how much of the needle has moved in that direction, but we thought we need to move. We have to push the envelope on that front. And another key element of what we do is around medication adherence, where, we see 1 in 2 patients drop off when it comes to chronic therapy.
Mm.
Physicians are disengaged, dissatisfied with what pharma is doing with them, and they want something differentiated, something truly patient centric. And pharma is looking for insights and top line revenue by increasing adherence. And we thought let's put these things together, use
Mm.
conversational AI analytics. Today is the time where technology can help us do all of this. It's not like neither of them had the intent, right? I think, with due respect, all the stakeholders have the right intent. Patients want to comply, but they're looking for right guidance. And today they're overwhelmed with
Mm.
information everywhere. So they want to do that guidance and support to the patient all the time, but there's a finite time that you have, and the number of questions that patients have are infinite. So, how do you bridge that? Pharma also wants to do something different. They have adherence as a big problem. It's a huge revenue issue for them.
Mm.
Keeping physicians happy is huge. The gap between pharma, physicians, and patients is ever widening. And they are
Mm.
also looking for a lot of insights into HCPs, into patient behaviors, and understanding those journeys and getting those analytics to have more impactful strategies for both. So, all in all, we try to bridge that by multi-agent AI, and it uses conversational AI analytics. We have a proprietary model they call the synapses, which is
Okay.
like the human brain, where every individual gets into a nodal structure of biopsychosocial parameters and
Right.
see an interplay of those nodes and then decide what is the right content that should go to them, what is the kind of message that should go to them. That, hey, Shubhendu was traveling to India last week and he mentioned to me about some travel medications. Let me check in on him, whether,
Mm.
how was his trip and did he face any health issues there? Or is his gut all right after coming back? Imagine that coming from your doctor support team to you.
Yeah.
That is the kind of customer experience and the patient experience we want to solve for.
Wow. So many good things that you've said there. But before I get into that, how did you come up with the name?
So, Iksa is short for Ikshana, which in
Okay.
Sanskrit means care with the utmost sight.
Wow.
So, the idea is to have a company with a vision, of course. So, the sight is there. And care is, I think, is critical. So
Yeah.
we call our programs as care programs, our back-end staff as care managers. So
Okay.
it's all about care. And I
Yeah.
also have been a very strong believer that healthcare is healthcare for a reason.
Yes. Health
So
and care are
so
different, but
care is the center of it.
yes. And I can, that's so beautiful because I can see that percolate down to how you're actually running this and making decisions. And I think you said a very beautiful thing there where you said, in terms of coming up with the needs analysis, identifying where the gaps are, often we set targets that we want to achieve and we go out to get them, but there's some assumptions that we make along the way. And oftentimes you'll hear ideas of like, oh, if we need to get like that, if we need to get like 10,000 orders or whatever, then people just need to do that. They just need to do that. So let's just teach them. But what you did was say, make the assumption that everyone's actually got the right and positive intent. And I think that's such a useful thing to actually uncover what's behind everything else, what's behind the decision making, the behaviors, and the change. And then you use that gap analysis and you used your knowledge and your research ability to say, okay, what are all of the factors that contribute to this patient's health and care? And how do we bring a technology to solve that? Is this an approach that you've had beforehand, or is this something that you've done for the first time? That is especially that assumption bit.
I think the assumption bit, of course, is the first time. Always stuck down on ideas, thinking that we should do it, but I think my risk-taking appetite isn't as high as it looks like. But I took the plunge finally. I think in healthcare, a lot of assumption, etc., comes in with experience,
Hmm.
and it's about if you worked in the industry, worked on all sides of the play, then you are able to do better guesstimates in
Right.
terms of where and how things will probably fall into. So there are more calculated risks, but yeah, it's the first time I'm doing a lot of things, and that's what the startup journey is all about, right? You're doing almost everything for the first time.
And you get to make it your own. You get to make these decisions that you didn't know that you had a choice over as well. What gave you the confidence to take that leap? You said it was a new journey, despite doing so many bold things, another big bold one.
I think this was one where I needed the most push, and
Okay.
reminds me of me as a kid who had almost hydrophobia. I would just not agree to get under the shower or get into the pool. And my mother took me for a summer vacation for 3 months, every day to the public pool, and I wouldn't do anything, just sit there. And at the end of 3 months was the first time I put my legs into the baby pool.
Okay.
Said we have made progress. Next year, he'll probably get into the baby pool. And then, of course, I became a water baby in itself. But sometimes you need that push. And
Mm.
this time it was my father who pushed me into this, saying, as our community of Gujaratis, we are stereotyped to have entrepreneurship in our blood, and that's what my dad reminded me of. And he said, deep down you want to do this. Deep
Mm.
down you want to, look at a problem, solve it your way, and see where that leads you to. Said if you are worried about, stability, you are worried about income, worried about what happens next, what happens if I fail, he said, you can always get back. He said, you have faith in yourself. You never knew you'll do all these weird things. So he said, if you were crazy enough to do all of this, he's like, take this last bit of crazy also before you turn too old or have regrets or midlife crisis that I should have or I could have. He said, if there is an opportunity your way, just jump into it. Don't leave any regrets. He said, it's fine if it doesn't work out. And I think I was just looking for that reinforcement and push from somebody near and dear who, you care for and they care for, and somebody knowing that, hey, I have your back, and,
Mm.
nobody better than a father to say that, I'm there for you. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
how the plunge happened.
That is beautiful. I think so many of us need that now. More and more of us want to take these bold leaps and journeys, and we often want to also stick to something that's well trodden and something that's well structured. And we find ourselves going from course to course, collecting knowledge and not actually applying it, and just hiding behind our degrees and certificates. So, getting that courage and that little push to take the leap is beautiful. And I guess, so when you look back at your entire career from where you are now, and obviously it's not over, it's always ongoing, but when you look back now, what are some of the things that have contributed to your success?
I think one has been playing more on my strengths, doing things that I enjoy, and then seeing how I make a career out of it. That was one way of doing it, and also this whole idea that I had as a student and always of saying yes and then figuring out how to get it done. So I am a bit of an opportunist, and have a lot of FOMO in life, and
Hmm.
so I always kept on taking each of these opportunities, and that's what has helped me. I think both the good and bad side of me of having that fear of missing out made me keep taking up a lot of things, which led from
Hmm.
one to the other. Like for instance, I took up this opportunity while I was at Novartis to mentor startups as a part of within the Novartis ecosystem. They had that kind of a program which they launched for some startups in Africa.
Wow.
And I just took it up, applied, lengthy, big application process. I said, I want to do it, let me fill it. And while doing that, I realized, oh, this is fun. And while mentoring and talking to the startups, I'm like, it's so much fun if I was on the other side. Like, I mean, today, of course, now I feel I'm better off as a mentor and not as a founder. But yeah, so, and that's where then Fitterfly happened, because I would have never looked at startups as an opportunity or never, taken it up when
Considered
when
it,
that
yeah.
came my way. I was never considering anything in that space. But
Mm.
this whole idea of, doing something all the time, jumping on opportunities, like, oh, this is new, let me do that. So that curiosity, I think, is what has kept me going where I am. Two is also a bit of sincerity and discipline in the role that I play. So the idea that, as doctors, you always think we put the patient first. And then when you move to the non-clinical side, you really don't know, the way corporate puts as KPIs and KRAs and etc. You don't know, because the only thing you've learned is I have to get do the best for the patient. That's the only KPI you've ever heard of. So how do you deliver sincerely without the imposter syndrome that, hey, will I be able to do this? Like, I mean, I know how to write prescriptions. Will I be able to like create a medical affairs plan?
Mm.
You don't know. So
And without a patient at the end of it, so you
yeah.
can't see where it's going.
So it's abstract, and I
Yeah.
think I remember in pre-med, we would talk about how physics is very abstract. One of my physics professor would say that, you excel in biology because you can see everything. He said, after all the subjects, your physics is a little weak is because everything is abstract. There is a proton there, there's an electron there, there's a photon somewhere. It's all there. You don't know where,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
if I tell you the human brain, you're like, yeah, I know where it is. If I slice and dice, I have all those things I can actually see and
See them.
visualize. So getting into that abstract thinking, learning
Mm.
things. So I think being a learner and being a work in progress is what I say contributes to everybody's success. I'm no different.
No, that's absolutely beautiful. I might say that FOMO was kind of your purpose at one point.
Yeah.
Because when you're so dead set on your purpose, you don't see anything else and you just keep going and you do all these bold things that you wouldn't have otherwise. And I guess like you mentioned the word strengths as well, and I really like strengths, and I tend to use like assessments that help identify strengths, so things like Gallup Strengths Assessment and other leadership assessments that give you a lot of insight. And once you've got that inner work and that inner information, I think it's quite easy to line it up with something that is a career that you want for yourself. Is that kind of the approach you take for the people you mentor as well?
Yeah, I strongly believe in for mentorship as well as when I'm hiring as well. It's
Hmm.
the same approach. I believe everybody should play on their strengths because
Yeah.
that's what helps you. And even when you're building complementary structures. And I mean, just before this today afternoon, I was speaking to one of my mentees who has got an offbeat opportunity and a role, and he's struggling to decide whether to take that up or whether to go back to the comfort zone of medical affairs. And I've been pushing him, that
Mm.
you have that in you too, because he's very adaptable by nature. And I thought, if you're getting a great opportunity which is a little out of the box, like take that leap of faith and do those things because you have those strengths. So if people don't play by their strengths, it you don't end up in a fulfilling career, is what I've realized.
Absolutely.
You cannot do it in the best possible way. And the
Hmm.
difference is X. It's not even
Mm.
1x, 2x. If you are playing on your strengths and you put a little impetus onto that, you excel by 10x versus you put 10 times the effort on something you're not great at, you'll still be 1x, 2x good at it. You'll never excel at it, even by putting in all that effort and hard work. So it's a constant approach, and I believe in giving whatever I know. It's a
Mm.
free flowing thing of mentorship for me, free flowing, that I'm not
Yeah.
going to hold back anything. If
Yeah.
I'm going to give you whatever, this is what you have, this is what I have learned over the way. And
Mm.
I tell them, a wise person learns from others' mistakes. So you should not just look at the success stories and all of it. And that's not what mentorship is for. I mean,
Mm.
I appreciate mentees who ask me the question saying, what didn't work for you? Or
Yeah.
you tell me a time when you actually failed.
Mm.
But people don't ask those bold questions. They're mostly asking like, hey, how do I get into AI? Is there a course for it? So
Yeah. Yeah. What do you say to them? I get so many people saying, I want to do health tech. I want to get to AI. What course do I do? What do you tell them?
So I tell them you figure out courses, but don't believe that any course will help you for the job. I said do it for your
Exactly.
self-learning. There are many ways to learn and do things. If you want a formal course, like that's your thing, go for it. But do ask them if they place you somewhere, because I don't know anybody who
I
places
don't
people
either.
with courses in AI.
No, not at all. I mean, I try to tell them that, if there's something that you're passionate about doing, get started, do the project. When you hit a roadblock, then you need to go searching for like, how do I overcome this roadblock? And sometimes that's a course, sometimes that's a mentor, sometimes that's a coach. And I think that's the right time to try and invest in something. Yeah. So beautiful. Cool. So let's do a quick flip the script, and like if you've got any questions for me or anything you'd like to ask me, go for it.
So I think in terms of mentorship and the things you do and to be a coach, right? I think from a very personal front, I was told by an astrologer that I should take up take up a career in speaking,
Okay.
in something like that make things work. So while I'm not the gray haired doctor, so I don't charge any honoraria for speaking assignments yet.
Okay.
But I want to understand, what got you into this in terms of coaching in terms of where,
Yeah.
especially niche like doctors, and I'm going to be very candid about it, where doctors after a certain point in time have a know-it-all syndrome within the domain that they are working at, and absolutely want to be blinded to everything else because they pick up that, specialty and subspecialty and then just want to excel into that. And, what did you think about why did you get into it, and, what is like a business model behind it as well? That's what I'm very curious to know.
Interesting. So I guess two phases to that. The first about like how I got into coaching and why I wanted to coach was, I guess, similar to you. I was looking to scale my impact, and I was like, okay, one-on-one patient care isn't doing it, and I wasn't ready to let go of like clinical practice. Thankfully, we've got a few other options in the NHS where you can kind of have a portfolio career and diversify your role. And so I said, okay, what else can I do? And while I was applying for a management consulting role, and I pretty much made up my mind that I'm going to quit and I'm going to focus purely on scaling my career, in between, I did a quality improvement fellowship. And that's when I got introduced to the methodology. And till now, I had been doing a lot of these projects and seeing systems that were failing and trying to fix them and trying to help them. But nothing was kind of sticking. Nothing was sort of long lasting. And I'd done like a lot of interest in leadership, and I was like reading about Cotter's 8 steps and trying to be a good leader to make this change stick and happen, but it just wasn't happening. And then I went to the QI world and I learned this methodology, and I was like, oh, this methodology is going to fix everything for me. It was kind of like doing an AI course, and I was like, the course is going to tell me what to do. And I remember like that whole year that I was doing this and I was working on a couple of different projects, I realized that it all comes down to people. Right? Like everything, like from start to finish, is all about people. You can have the best idea, you can have the best methodology, but everything is always around people. And on both sides, right? There's people who are leading. So people who are leading the hospital, the department, the shift, the resus, whatever it is, clinically, non-clinically. There's the leadership aspect and then the followership aspect. And it just gradually like it sieved through everything. And what came up to the surface was that the people are what matter the most. And if I really want to make an impact, if I really want to make a difference in the world, then I need to master people. And both from a leadership perspective, which I feel like I kind of was already doing, but like if I wanted to help other people help people, then that was what I had to master. And thankfully, the way this organization was doing it was through coaching. So they were doing quality coaching. And I was like, okay, what's this? And at the same time, I was hearing about management consultants using executive coaches, and I kind of just did my research and I said, this is what I like. And I went back to my family and friends and I said, what's my unique value? What's something that you would come to me for? And there wasn't much, apart from people often said, when I'm confused, I come to you. So I said, okay, cool. so
Really?
it kind of all lined up there, and I said, I just have to do this. This is the way that I'm going to be able to make a difference to the people who provide care when it's needed the most. This is the way I'm going to be able to make a change that lasts. And it's something that I really enjoy. Plus, there was a little bit of an entrepreneurial potential, and I've kind of always been excited about that. I think I've always been I've wanted to be a chef. I've been very innovative. I've developed like suture tutors and entire like surgical curriculums for medical students and things. So I wanted to get back into that creative aspect as well. So the entrepreneurship kind of added up there. So yeah, I took this journey, and in a very silly manner, what the first thing I did was to go and get my coach training certification done instead of actually taking action. So I'm like, I wish I did the other way around. But hey, through that, I actually met loads of fantastic people. They were the push for me to say, like, you can do this, you can take this leap, and allowed me to see what's possible on the other side. I guess the second half of the question of like, what's the business model behind this, and like, how do you actually make this work? So for me, the focus has always been on clinicians, because I feel like that's where I resonate the most. And my purpose is always about good healthcare and good care for people at the end of it. And so naturally kind of gravitated towards clinicians. And even though coaching itself is kind of industry agnostic, the language we speak is very sort of similar, and the analogies you use and the way you kind of converse is easier to understand between clinicians. And what I enjoyed about clinicians the most was, and I've coached a couple of non-clinicians as well, but with clinicians, the moment there's like that aha moment, the rest of it immediately flows. Like there's no, it's like, oh, it clicked, and just like, I'm going to take action, I'm going to do it. So I really enjoyed that bit. And you're absolutely right. I think there is a bit of a hesitance to say, okay, I'm going to ask somebody to show me the way. But there are a small subset of people who say, I'm going on a journey which is unknown. It's a career beyond a typical traditional career, and maybe I need some help about it. So I guess a large chunk of my work on LinkedIn or through this podcast, through everything that I'm doing, is to raise awareness and to show people that, hey, you don't have to do this alone. And if you've been thinking about it and you're wanting to make a bigger impact, don't hesitate just because you don't know how to get there. And I think stories like yours inspire them to do that. So hopefully through that, and then a little bit of the give them what they want, sell them what they want, and give them what they need kind of situation of saying they don't really want to call it coaching, they don't want to call it mentorship, they want to call it something else. Like, okay, whatever you want to call it, we'll call it that. Like a thought partnership.
Does it end with a course certificate at the end, and then they can add those letters to the never-ending list of degrees?
So many people have asked me for that. I'm about to launch a course, actually. I'm doing like a pre-recorded course, and I'm doing like a 6-week, I want to call it like a fellowship because people like fellowships. And I'm sure they'll ask me for a certificate at the end of it. And I'm going to say, no, sorry, this certificate is not going to do anything. But yeah, that's the kind of like, there's one way vision in my mind in terms of what I want to do for the coaching business, but then there's a different reality to what people are expecting and are used to buying and purchasing. So that's one aspect. And I guess the speaking side of it is quite interesting. So speaking, I guess, on live stages or virtual stages like podcasts is something that's hugely influential and is a way for people to really get to know you. Like, for example, Daniel Priestley in his book, I don't know if you can see it, Key Person of Influence, talks about, he's got another book called Oversubscribed. He talks about this 7-11-4 principle. He says you need to have 7 hours of watch time, 11 instances across 4 different channels. So like audio, video, podcast, posts, whatever, newsletter, and those kind of things. And it's just an opportunity for people to get to know you and understand you and get exposed to a world that they wouldn't have otherwise. You know, the way previously you had to find a mentor and really spend a lot of time with them, we're now living in a world where you can listen to a podcast and you get the best of their insights in an hour, and you just like Neo Matrix download all of that. So yeah, I mean, I'm not getting paid for any speaking gigs as of yet, but hope that eventually I might. I don't know if I'll get nominated for the TEDx NHS talk coming up in September. I don't think so.
We all wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I guess that's a long way of answering that. Like the business model looks like a couple of asynchronous resources that people can access, a lot of free resources that people can access. And then if people want one-on-one help, then I'm there for that as well. The tricky bit is to do it in a way that suits your lifestyle and remembering like why I started this whole journey in the first place. So yeah.
That's great. I think it's great knowing this, from you in terms of how you got into it, where it is, and it being so unfiltered. A lot of people generally add fluff around their ideas and what they're coming up with, and not try to probably oversell themselves. But I think you were very honest and unfiltered.
Thank you.
Which is very appreciated. Yeah, great.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say. And of course, I think we have very similar wavelengths in terms of what we want to get out in the world, how we want to help people. I think you are a fantastic mentor, and like taking that further is I think always a backup, like a safety net in terms of what you bring to the world. If I mean, I guess obviously you knew that already, but in case.
No, so in terms of impact, when we talk about impacting things at scale, right? I also believe, particularly for mentorship, it's that one little tweak I probably suggested to a mentee that changed his life, his or her life in some way, or a career decision. The smallest thing, or maybe them getting an award for a research that you just ask them to tweak a little bit, is more fulfilling sometimes. Just then, while for patients I always look at impact at scale and in big numbers with a lot of zeros. But I think in mentorship I look at that one moment. It's not even that one mentee. I look at that one moment that actually changes something, because that is where I think a domino effect actually starts without us realizing that we started it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially when you're working with clinicians and leaders that then go on to impact so many different lives. I think that it scales up very quickly from there. Yeah.
I think you're doing some amazing work there, and really happy to see that progress, coming up, and the course. And I think while you speak very well, I would also be happy to see you write a book as well.
It's a hidden piece in progress, probably over a few years, but yeah, I've got a Notion page already set up for a book.
Awesome. I think you're already there.
Oh, thank you so much.
Just need to keep filling it. I think you should come to the Himalayas or the beautiful beaches in India to just sit and start writing.
Oh, that is such a beautiful idea. I will have to convince my wife into it. But I think that's amazing. That's beautiful. I should definitely do that. Cool. I'm just looking at our audience to see if there's any questions. You get an opportunity to ask us any of your questions live. We've got about another 5 to 10 minutes. If you want to hop in and put your questions into the comments now, and we can answer those for you. Anything to do with pharmacology, anything to do with industry careers in pharmacology, pharmaceuticals, I guess, and anything to do with AI and startups and coaching and mentoring. We're happy to help. In the meanwhile, where can people find you when it comes to mentorship?
I think LinkedIn, and on LinkedIn there is a link to my TopMate page as well. So people can find me that, or just send in a DM on LinkedIn.
It's fantastic.
So it's
And
a
if any of
fantastic.
these people are listening on Spotify or YouTube and are not on LinkedIn, definitely get on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Like, how can you not be on
I know, right?
LinkedIn
There's this, yeah.
today? So that's where
Amazing.
you can find me.
So thank you for tuning into the Medic Side Hustles podcast. Our next live podcast will be on the 17th of March with Portia Gibson, the post-op nurse. We'll be discovering what it means to take your clinical services private in the NHS. Join my newsletter to stay updated. If you're wondering whether you're ready to make medicine your side hustle, try my 3-minute quiz in the comments and description below. Do you have any questions or last actions for our listeners, Manthan?
I think I'm more curious to try your quiz and see if I actually land up with a side hustle, or should I go back to clinical practice. But no, I think my thing to everyone is, it's great to be a doctor. It's great to be that. We haven't realized our full potential as doctors yet, I feel, in today's changing times, in the VUCA world, as they call it. Doctors need to do a lot more than what they're doing. So don't settle for less. Don't settle for just being happy with a few patients, a few surgeries. You can do tremendous things. And I think if doctors get together to do tremendous things, there's nothing like it. Like, we are an
Yes.
unstoppable force. Difficult for us to get together, but then we are better than the Avengers.
Absolutely. I love that. So for all the listeners, I hope the conversation sparked some ideas and inspired you to think bigger about your career and your impact. Until next time, stay curious, keep solving big problems, and remember, you have the power to create something extraordinary. See you soon.